back on Friday, Culture Club half hour.
Get it,
What's up,
Ben.
Jeff?
Back on. It's Friday.
Straight back at it.
May I say, Ben, that it is cold in Miami.
No, I don't believe you. I don't believe you.
The week we've had here post Basel. Feels like everyone took the sun away with them as they left. No,
Yeah.
how's it been? You look warm.
It's freezing here. It's freezing
Oh, it
here.
is.
I haven't been outside today. Because I have been busy in the house. We're getting ready. We're having a holiday party tomorrow, so
That's right.
We're getting ready for that. I'm gonna miss you up here, Jeff, for the holiday party.
Yeah, it'll
It's
be
okay.
your annual event is a great time. I do want to mention too that the New York State Energy Authority let me know that it's going to be quite windy upstate there in Sullivan County.
Oh.
The weather's been tough. Shout out to Sullivan County. I miss you guys.
Shout out Sullivan County.
Anyway.
Cool. Well, and speaking of that, yeah, it's cold here. What should we talk about, Jeff? You mentioned listening to Lauren Sherman this morning on her podcast.
I'm listening to Lauren a lot more.
Yeah, I thought the show today was really good. I'm gonna send her a note later. I really liked the Jens Grieb part. He's the CEO, I guess, at Skims, and was the founder of Frame, and as it turns out, a bunch of other businesses. But I just found it super, super informative. Like I like all of the gossipy, like what's happening in the fashion world thing, but
unless you're involved, bud.
Well, yeah, but I'm never involved.
Not yet.
Thankfully, not at that level. But I really liked it because it was instructive without being like business casey, you know? Like,
yeah, I think it's great. Skims is crushing. There's no doubt about it. They're just absolutely crushing. The North Face collab looks pretty damn good.
No, it doesn't sound like you can get it. It sounds like it was all gone.
It was faster than I mean, at least from what I've seen, it went extremely fast, which means that there probably wasn't that many pieces made anyways.
Well, the thing that I thought was interesting about that, right, was that, and this is part of what made the pod valuable to me today, was, he's like, look, it exceeded our expectations for the collaboration by probably 4 or 5 times, which is fine. But part of the reason that we could only sell so much is because only so much was available. Totally. Literally. And of course, we as consumers never think about the fact that manufacturers can only make from material that they have available. And if there is a finite amount of material, you can only make so many products. And I just thought that was a nice reminder.
And we're making more than ever. I mean, it's incredible for as much as we speak about the slowdown, or sorry, not a slowdown. What am I saying? A movement toward sustainability. Unfortunately,
buy less, buy better. Yeah.
Sustainability is really off the table at a lot of companies right now. Not even so much off the table, just deprioritized within their own offering. Their company. It's a strange thing, and unfortunately,
it isn't though, because it's antithetical to capitalism. It's like you increase your business size, you grow your business by doing one of two things: you sell more, or you sell at a higher margin, right? So it's you either push towards a higher price point, or you make more stuff.
There's just not. I'm talking about people that are trying to like use more sourced materials that are, say, organic or better for the environment. That stuff is just still too expensive for most people. Most people are not willing to buy like inorganic cotton tea maybe the way you and I would, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is,
and that's the argument I think that a lot of these big companies are making. Not for the better, that's for sure. But with that said, Lauren had the great writer and her husband. I didn't want to lead with her husband because he's much more than her husband.
She said so. She said to disclose on the pod. So Dan Frommer is her husband. You hear so much about this. He's a former colleague of hers that
Dan has been everywhere.
They fell in love. They had a podcast, and now they fell in love and had a
podcast. That's right.
They make reports. It's like you and me, Jeff. Fell in love and had a podcast.
Be careful, Ben. Be careful what you wish for. But Dan and Coefficient Capital released, and I think it's a biannual, or I think they do it on a few topics through the year. You know how these things are, Ben. People are just trying to find insights and glowing insights, and why not Mr. Frommer, who does have access to that stuff and writes about this all day. New Consumers' newsletter. couple takeaways that I thought were interesting from the pod. I don't want to give away the full newsletter. This idea that alcohol consumption is going down, I guess, is full of shit, as they say. Now, the thing is,
apocryphal. Apocryphal.
I like that. I'm going to use that. The thing about I haven't gone too deep into the data yet because I'm still tackling Shein and TikTok at the beginning of the paper. Is that the demographic that they use? I think he said it was 3,000 Americans, and I'm curious to know if that's what the demo was for it. It may actually say that at the beginning of it.
Wait, what's the question?
The question is that true across the board? Or is it only true within a specific generation, which would be interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the specific answer to that, but this panel of 3,000 that they get their information from was designed to replicate an American consumer landscape, and
that's right.
is not. I don't think it's generationally specific, although obviously there are generational insights within it. The perceived decline in alcohol consumption versus the actual non-decline, though, I think was across audiences and was not generationally specific. And so, yeah, it's interesting though, because the other thing that was discussed briefly was that the Ozempic and GLP-1 inhibitors seem not to be affecting alcohol long term.
Right.
And there was an anecdote about somebody, who didn't want to drink when they first got on Ozempic, but now can drink again, essentially.
Right.
Like the shock to the system,
craving,
was great.
Not the craving, the taste for it comes back.
Yeah,
which was a side effect.
Exactly. Which is interesting because there are so many like the actor, I don't know if you saw it, but the actor Tom Holland just launched a non-alcoholic beer called Biro. Recently, we've heard everything about Athletic becoming just this, sector killer. All of these sort of, alcohol alternatives have come into the market, and some of them are quite good. The Biro stuff is, I mean, the liquid itself is quite good. And then the big brewers have figured out how to make non-alcoholic beer taste good also. But it's sort of like, all right, is this a solution in search of a problem, or is it an actual market need?
I mean, to Dan, I think Dan did mention that it's still super niche, I think is the actual words he used, or very niche. It could be wrong, but I think he used the word super niche, which makes me believe that it's still, there's still a small, it's still a small sector, though it gets a lot of press, or at least it gets a lot of press in the circles I'm in.
The how big a sector, though, is a little bit like how long is a piece of string. I mean, it's a gigantic sector measured against many others. It's just not a gigantic sector compared to drinks as a market or alcohol as a market.
And again, I want people to go over to newconsumer.com/trends to see the report. The interesting thing that was the other takeaway, if I think of the vices that were popular, maybe the generation that we came from or before, the other one, of course, is smoking. That indeed looks to be on the decline, but we're at about 60%, or 6 out of every 10 adults in America drink regular, and we've essentially been there since the 40s, is what Frommer's data is showing. So worth checking out. I'm always a fan of looking at consumer data just to understand what the hell's going on. And he's a very sound voice in this.
You're generally like a bit of an archaeologist, no matter what it is. It's consumer data, clothes at the thrift, whatever it is. Like, just digging. You're very inspired by Indiana Jones. Am I right?
I am. And by the way, just to move on the topics for a second, dead men's Oxfords. Not to say that women don't wear Oxfords. Ben, you don't thrift, so I'm going to fill you in.
What are we talking about here? Dead men's Oxfords?
Dead men's Oxfords. Listen, when you go to the thrift, there's a fantastic amount of amazing American-made clothes to be found there, especially like old Brooks Brothers made in the USA. And actually, one of my favorite non-made in the USA shirts from the 90s were Land's End Oxfords. And this morning I was at an event with my son, and he asked me, why does my shirt say PAE on it? And this is a fantastic shirt that I thrifted. And yeah, I'm wearing a dead man's Oxford. His initials were PAE. My son believes it stands for People Against Eggs, but Probably was like Peter
I-
Allen Edmonds or something.
The militant vegan
Yeah,
front there, people
the
against eggs. Okay. All right. See, I thought when you said Dead Men's Oxford, I was like, okay, this is a brand. This is some thrift vendor that you found at the thrift con last week. This is whatever it is. I mean, Jeff, I think there's probably a business there in it for you, like Dead Men's Oxfords. Like it's got a ring. It's got a ring.
On this idea of like the amount of product we put out there, it is interesting because it's interesting that there are still a tremendous number of Americans. And by the way, this is personal choice. People I have run into that actually, when you tell them that you're wearing like a pre-owned garment, or if you don't use the word vintage, they just assume it's dirty for some reason. They just assume it's like used, or whose blood is on that? Whose sweat is on that?
Is this do you feel like that's an American thing and not just a Miami thing? I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I struggle with that perception. I don't know that I mean, listen, this may be a New York thing, right? Which may be the outlier, but that is not an attitude that I encounter.
Yeah, I think certainly we have it down here. Maybe it is more of a Florida thing. And I think for me, the part of that is worth discussing is like, where do we begin? Like, you think about it, for as long as we've been in this idea of at least Earth Day, or in trying to do better, we're going on 50 to 60 years of this movement, right?
60. Yeah.
And have we progressed? Have we actually made that movement? But again,
no, obviously we've moved in the other direction.
Does it require a catastrophic moment to change how we do things?
I mean, the difficulty is, it's like, what does the catastrophic moment look like that would be effective beyond, the people that are immediately affected, right? It's like the nuclear disaster in Japan was a huge problem for a very small region in Japan. It was not a problem for anybody else, and it didn't change nuclear use anywhere else. Nor really should it, I think. So it's the incredible disaster of Hurricane Helene, I think I know it was a hurricane in North Carolina. I'm just not sure which one it was. But in Asheville, like this is it's catastrophic for Western North Carolina.
I asked somebody about that,
change
actually.
Anything here, and you know what I mean. So it's like, well, why? It's just way too hard to make people care. So I don't know. I mean, I both am anti-catastrophe, generally speaking. That's my philosophy. I'd like to be against catastrophes, but yeah, I also just think like it would have to be at such a scale that as to be sort of unimaginable, and would be bad. By the way, I watched, sorry, I'm going to digress a little bit, but I watched recently 12 Monkeys. Have you watched 12 Monkeys anytime recently?
Is this a Brad Pitt flick?
Yeah, well, it's Terry Gilliam starring Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt.
Yes.
And
I love it.
So the idea of it is, there is a pandemic in 1997 that kills 5 billion of the then 7 billion people in the world. Totally destroys the cohesion of society, and forces those who survive underground. And so they then figure out some means by which to master time travel, and they send Bruce Willis back from the future to determine what the cause of the pandemic was. And they have this theory around the Society of the 12 Monkeys being the culprits here. The interesting thing about that, right, is, I mean, having lived through COVID now, we have a sense of what a global pandemic actually looks like, and all of the ways in which it affects us from top to bottom. But there was news this morning in a couple of different places that I read about something called DNA mirroring, where did you read about this?
I didn't read about it, but
so I'm going to find the source.
I did see the headline on that.
I don't misquote it. But the essentially, all of our DNA is, let's call it, right-handed, and meaning that on an axis that it is oriented towards the right-hand side, and all of the amino acids and protein, or maybe that's the amino acids, but all of the flip side is left-handed. And they've now worked out this way that they can replicate left-handed the DNA on the right-hand side. And so they're going like, okay, well, we're going to be able to solve a bunch of diseases, right? And take care of a bunch of congenital defects and so on. There were warnings issued this morning by scientific bodies, basically saying like, we run the risk of creating essentially organisms which can replicate and expand far faster than anything we can control, and so you risk creating this existential what's it called, pandemic. And so I don't know, it made me think of 12 Monkeys. So I was thinking of 12 Monkeys this morning.
We are in a nervous
right?
No, I mean, we are in a nervous place in this world. I think one headline I saw on the AI side is that we are now at a place where, these things are truly thinking of themselves. And yeah, we'll see what happens. What I find interesting and crazy at the same time is the story that came out recently. And again, I'm not here to talk about the politics, but just to talk about how certain technologies that we have in this world really are fragmented, dangerous. Big story in the New York Times that came out regarding the United States, and I want to make sure I get it right. I think it was the State House saying that Americans should use encryption when they are making telephone calls. And it was due to a now known breach of the full U.S. communication system by China. It's an absolutely bonkers thing.
So the notion that basically any of our phone calls are being monitored, potentially being monitored.
Exactly.
Okay.
Trying to pull this up as I.
Let me tell you, the Chinese are getting a lot of really scintillating stuff about, where to find plugs that have 2 female ends at Home Depot.
Well, the story came out actually yesterday. It looks like it only came out as a podcast, and I don't seem to see it as a standalone yet. But essentially, they've broken into the full system. It's amazing to me that for the first time, and again, not to get into politics, but during certain moments, our government has said, hey, phone companies, hey, everyone, let us break through your encryption. Break through it so that we have access to the bad guys. You won't worry about the good guys, right? And, now even the Fed is telling us to watch our phone calls. So it's showing us that these old, we actually rely on these old technologies. And listen, to the point you made, what the hell do they care about what you and I are doing? But they supposedly were live monitoring. They have, or rather I think the FBI has high assurance that they were live monitoring phone calls between Trump and JD Vance. Like, how insane is that shit?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it makes total sense, and it is difficult to countenance the idea that our most privileged conversations are accessible to foreign actors, but it also, it feels almost naive to think that they wouldn't be.
We can almost assume that they are at this point, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Ben, what else is going on this Friday?
Well, I don't know, Jeff. It's a pretty mellow, cold, freezy day over here in Manhattan. Oh, you know what I'm in Brooklyn, not in Manhattan. Who was it that I was talking to? Oh, I wanted to mention something about speaking of OG clothes stuff, because you'll get a kick out of this. I was talking to my buddy Greg Galbraith, who's the VP of marketing at Journeys, the multi-brand shoe, footwear and clothing specialty store that you'll know from malls, teen girl consumer in their sites. And we were talking about Timberland, because that's the offering that they have for guys. They do a lot of business with Uggs. They do a lot of business with Birkenstock. They have a great business with Timberland for young men. And we were talking about my son having asked for a pair of Timberlands for his birthday, and me saying, well, actually, you can have my Timberlands, which I bought in 1994, and are the same exact boots as he wants now,
Exactly the same.
but they're 31 years old. They're still in great shape, and so yeah, he's inheriting those instead of necessarily getting a birthday wish granted. But what Greg said was, he was just like, yeah, and those are probably made in, or we sort of decided together, they're probably made in New Hampshire at the time, right, in 94. And just the idea that these things are made to exist for decades.
I'm in a huge footwear. I don't know why. Maybe because I have a week of cold in Miami, but speaking of vintage
You're wearing
Timberlands,
more than one pair of shoes at a time right now, Jeff? You got shoes in your hands?
I was going to ask you, this has absolutely nothing to do with Timberland, but I'm kind of in love with this Union Jordan faux Suey Coke slide.
Well, interesting. That's okay. I was just going to say that's a Suey Coke, but it's not. It's Union Jordan. Interesting.
I bought them new for, believe it or not, $20 on eBay.
How about that,
Chris? And they're not fake.
No, I mean, it's funny. Chris and Union have so friend of the pod, Chris Gibbs, who with his wife Beth runs Union LA. They have been doing a ton of collab announcements recently, and it really feels like they're starting to move into a space where it's like the whole shop starts to be built around collaborative product. There was one announced yesterday with Super Union. It was Super Union, and then there was another one announced the previous Friday that was, I think, born and raised in Union. And the thing that I like about it is that Chris shows up. He puts himself in all of the lookbook or all of the advertising imagery. And
their sons were crushing it.
Oh yeah,
shout out to
true.
that fam as well. But back to Timberland for 1 second.
Okay.
I to the point around 90s, and you're right. The construction, is it as good? I think it is. Most people that actually wore Timberlands in the 90s beat the shit and actually wore them. Certainly people in the city were wearing it as well. But I've actually been rebuying made in England 90s Doc Martens.
I know you talked about this on Monday.
Yeah, we talked about this on Monday, and at the same time, to me, it's really, I just feel like we want to get dressed again. Like, we go through these phases where we just, I don't know, maybe I
wish Jian was here. Like the idea of can't wait for it to get cold so I can start dressing.
Right.
It's such a Jian sentiment. I think I'm going to see Jian tonight, by the way.
For Janice's thing.
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
so we're gonna see our buddy Janice off to a sojourn to Japan. It sounds like
she's gonna spend 2 years at the big headquarters in Japan. I don't want to give away where she is, but it's gonna be fantastic for her, and for Jian, like, he's loving life right now, bro. Like, any chance to get to Tokyo? Let's go.
For sure.
One other thing on shoes that came up this week too was,
tell me,
you got to give it up to Jacob Gallagher, who, by the way, I love his new little.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
I love the photo he's got here and his great little bio on.
It's so funny. Like, I read the story that you're talking about this morning, and I'm just like, man, this is not going to this is not going to do me any favors as far as Jeff's confidence in his choices.
See,
because you've been on the Mephisto wave for years.
As soon as I got to Miami. Is that
what it was? It was Miami that got you onto Mephisto? I'm interested.
Came to Miami. It happened to be that there was a running store at the Aventura Mall that sold Mephisto next door, at a Mephisto store next door. And the one time a year where they put that thing on sale, and I pulled a pair. They're just comfortable, man. What can I say? We're talking about, of course, the Shoemaker Mephisto is a piece that Jacob wrote this week around Procell, and Brian Procell himself.
Shout out Brian. Shout out Jess.
Ruba. I love this. Jacob is crushing it right now with his writing.
Now at his new home at the New York Times. Yeah,
it's just, they're giving him so much freedom to be him, and I really love what he's writing these days. But Grand Poobah Procell is releasing a Mephisto. It's called a Match. It's a pretty well-known model. We've seen other collabs come in the past. Maybe the one that sticks out to many who have been paying attention was when Concepts actually flipped the match to look like an old vintage Nike walking shoe that people have seen. But it's
Really?
a shoe.
Oh, I don't
Yeah,
know if I guess I'm not people who know because I missed that one.
and because I'm the only guy that pays attention to Mephisto.
You're
What can
not
I
the
say?
only guy that pays attention to Mephisto. There are hundreds of thousands of grandfathers who also pay attention to Mephisto.
With that said, the grandfathers. And by the way, ProCell's version, which is in green, there's 100 of them. Here's the thing about Mephisto. It is an investment. It, to me,
yeah.
it's, the match itself, I think, and listen, if you're listening to this pod, you can get the match for $299 right now on Zappos, which is $100 off what it usually is. It's a $400 walking shoe. And it's been around forever. I believe it's made in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. But ProCell crushes it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, I obviously Brian and Jess are friends, but they do amazing work, amazing curation, and have been so important in establishing this idea that, exactly your point earlier, like vintage is about picking, it's about provenance, it's about the specifics. It's not about, cheap, dirty, old shit, but rather the very special things that you can only find through, those means.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah,
it's a French company. My bad.
Yeah, I was going to say it's French. I don't know where the shoes are actually manufactured, but this deal was done with Mephisto USA for the match, and they're interesting. So you're saying that they're on Zappos for $299. That's
white version. There's a white version on Zappos of the match. I'm gonna.
What else are you can't play shuffleboard in non-white shoes, right?
Well, they are true walking shoes. That's the thing. So you tend to buy them now on the website. It says buy true to size, but I have been told in store that you should buy a half size smaller because they tend to run big. Oh, I'm sorry, Ben. My bad. They're back to $398. You know how Zappos and Amazon are.
Oh, you see, yeah, sure. They gotten an 11/11 deal there for a second.
Well, the problem is I didn't pull the trigger on it, but extremely comfortable shoe.
I just found a pair of Cruisers in brown desert for $221.
I like the rainbow,
a retailer called Arthur Knight.
Yeah, the Mephisto Rainbow is another fun one. It's a bit more clunky, and it to me only works in all white.
Okay.
I think Jian would disagree with me. Oh, by the way, I think Nordstrom may have done something with
you think that okay, well, whatever. I mean,
Ben, give it to me, please.
The way that you're repping for Nurse Core is killing me right now.
So check it out. That's Mephisto, and quite frankly, it's a shoe brand that people should know. Like,
Yeah.
To me,
well, and aside from Jacob writing about it in the New York Times, Rory Setrin wrote about it in the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago as well. It just
did.
She did. Yeah.
Okay.
Mephisto's having a moment.
Yeah. That's how it is. The other thing, too, is I'm in the middle of grading my papers for my trend forecasting class.
Okay.
And they did a Basel trend report for me, so I should have a little bit of an idea of what the Basel trend looks will be next week.
Oh, the looks.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought, I mean, of course, you're teaching at a fashion college. Of course, they would do it on the looks. But I thought for some reason they were going to do a trend report on, like, the art or what was popping or whatever else.
I leave that to the experts, Ben.
Yeah, fair enough. Speaking of art,
did you buy anything this week?
Art-wise? No, I didn't. Yeah, just like buying art every week.
Man, you need to give me the link to that artist who, I apologize, man. We talked about him. He's the guy that basically paints a piece a day, and you just got to get onto his. Am I wrong that we did talk about that?
Are you talking about Steve Keen who did the? You're not talking about Steve Keen who did the pavement Wowie Zowie cover, and
maybe it was an artist that you mentioned who was essentially he makes a piece of art a day, and you can essentially purchase it, but the wait is like 300 days at this point or something like that. He's behind.
Yeah.
I'll look for another time.
We're going to have to go back to previous episodes of this podcast and learn what we were talking about at any given moment.
Ben, listen, it's been...
okay, fine. It's been half an hour. We got to stop.
I don't want to stop you, Ben.
we have to. It's the format of the pod. That's the deal. Like it's our social contract with the audience. We
I
have
like
to stop.
that. I like that.
The one thing though that I wanted to say was that a very cool development in the art world, and one that I hope our younger listeners, viewers, take advantage of. The Whitney Museum in the Meatpacking District has now is opening its doors for free every day to people under 25.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
Yeah,
there we go.
yeah. So it's right. So you and I are still going to pay through the nose as we should. But yeah, if you're under 25, you can go to the Whitney for free now, and you should. So
That's
go check it out.
fantastic. That'd be great. I'd love to, Ben, maybe next on the next show, you can give us some of your favorite recommendations. We've talked about a couple Substacks that you really love, and I feel like you truly are like a Substack master. Some of your favorite picks there in the art world, so folks can follow along as well.
Okay. Yeah, super down.
Everyone, thanks for listening. We taping this on Friday, so we'll be back next week. Please do us a favor and subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcast player,
or YouTube.
And give us a like on the socials. We're at,
but not on TikTok because it's being banned. No, I'm just joking.
Where should I go with TikTok?
Maybe next Friday we'll have more information.
I just don't think our show would work on TikTok. What am I? That sounds terribly old. Anyway, all right, Ben. Have a great week, bud.
All right, Jeff.